Hello, everyone. We still have a few people calling in, so we're going to wait a few more moments to get started.
Sounds good.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, asking the question, what's in a post and how to quantify social media success. Today's webinar features Allie Van Dyke, the Marketing Communications Consultant for Austin, Texas.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, Allie. Now, this presentation is brought to you as part of the Agency to Agency webinar series, where we bring the best and brightest from government, schools, and law enforcement to share their tips, tricks, and all the lessons learned about how to use social media successfully in the public sector. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping issues. All attendees are on mute. There will be time for a Q&A following the presentation, and if you have any questions that pop up during Allie or Ray's speaking, you have the questionnaire and question box on the side of your screen. Feel free to use that function anytime you have questions that pop up during the webinar. We'll follow up by email with any resources mentioned in today's presentation. Speaking today, we have Allie Van Dyke from Austin, Texas, followed by Ray Carey, the CEO of Archive Social, and I will be your moderator in today's webinar. A little bit more about Allie Van Dyke. Allie is a Kansas native who has spent the last 4 years working in communications for local government, specializing in social media and strategic communications. At the City of Austin, Van Dyke has led the way in updating the city's social media policy, formalizing and overseeing the work of the Social Media Committee, and developing best practices and protocols for social media use, including archiving, content guidelines, and language access. Prior to working in local government, she covered government as a newspaper reporter. I also happen to know that Allie is a very proud pet owner to her lovely dogs and a big fan of 80s music. Welcome, Allie.
Thank you, Jessica. All true statements. So.
All right, Allie, you should be getting access right about.
Yep. There we go. All right.
We are seeing you. You're on screen.
You see it?
Yes.
All right, cool. Well, welcome everyone. I'm really glad you took some here today. I have the chat screen open too, so if I say something that leads to a question, fire it off and I will do the best I can to monitor them while I'm talking. So just really quick today, I'm going to tell you about the metrics the City of Austin's main social media team tracks and how we developed those metrics, and more importantly, why data matters. So not just reporting for management, which is I know something that a lot of us are asked to do, but mostly because metrics are critical to improving your work in social media, which then leads to these awesome reports and data that you can send to management. So a bit about me. I know Jessica talked a little bit, so I'm not going to go over too much of that anymore. However, I was not going to miss an opportunity to share pictures of my dogs, so sorry, not sorry. But one important thing about this deck that I'm using, the government that works for all, and the strategic direction that you see on there, this is actually branded content from the citywide strategic plan. And I'm doing this intentionally. And anytime I talk about social media with anyone, whether that's internal or external management peers, I use branding from our strategic plan so it continues to drive home how important social media is to reaching our goals as a city. I think that's really critical in how you frame social media and these statistics for your management, because that's the language they speak and the language their bosses speak. So the more you can continue to tie social media in, even just visually, the better off you're going to be. Okay, so why metrics matter. A lot of the questions I get about social tracking and reporting deal with management, right? So which data points do they need to see, and how can I show them the work we're doing is important and advocate for the resources we need? I think before you get into which metrics matter, you have to figure out why metrics matter for your organization and for your management. After spending quite a bit of brain power on this question, here's what I've come up with. In my experience, unless you can take the time to explain to management the difference between impressions and engagements and what algorithms are, or your management has experience in social media, they really only care about follower increases, which if you work in social, you know, means next to nothing really. So the data that I'm advocating you pull is really important to one person or team and one only, and that's the people working in social media. Analytics can show you what's working and what's not. They can give you insights into your audience and the types of content they want, when they want it. And when you learn from your audience, you can adjust your strategy. So you can use the algorithms to your advantage and start reaching and gaining even more followers, which per my point just then, that's what's really gonna get the attention of your management and what they wanna see. So that's the true value of analytics and what I'm here to talk to you about today, which metrics to use and how to gain insights from them to up your game. I think used strategically, metrics can be one of the most powerful tools in your toolbox, from increasing effectiveness to making an argument to management for additional support. And I know this because it's what we did here in Austin. So just really quickly on that, I promise it works. The too long didn't read version of our pilot project that led to the metrics I'm going to be talking about today. A small team within my department looked at the data from our main 3 accounts for the city, so Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and we realized we were hardly reaching any of our followers. So we told the executives that, and we pitched a 3-month-long pilot that included a dedicated team. Dedicated, you can't see me, but I'm doing air quotes because, you know, we all have a million other things to do. So we kind of had to divide our time. So yes, we were dedicated, but not solely, just more so than we had been. We also advocated for editorial control over our accounts and weekly meetings where this small team would go over analytics and future plans. So we adjusted our strategies and content as we learned more about how our posts were performing, thanks to these weekly meetings and analytics. And in just 6 months, we eclipsed nearly every metric from the before times, which is how we quantify them now. And we turned those lessons that we learned into a style guide, and we successfully argued for a part-time dedicated staff member for social. And again, this is all because of the metrics we selected and how we explained them to management. So I hope that drives home the point of why metrics are important. And I want to get into the templates and metrics we use. If there's time, I have kind of the more detail about the pilot we went through and some of the results of that that we can get into if there's interest in time. But here we go. All right, so the metrics. These are metrics that we look at from our team for dedicated to social media. There are other metrics literally on the next slide that I want to talk about for management, but these are the ones that we identified for our team to look at throughout the pilot project. We looked at these numbers weekly, and these were the metrics that really rose to the top, both from informing our progress and performance, and also when we tied them back into our department goals. So the number of posts, obvious, but it's important for calculating engagements and to show your output. The number of followers, again, this is the easiest one by far for executives to understand. And the next one would be the number of new followers. You can show that growth. That you don't have to understand algorithms or engagement to know that more people are following you. And that's why those are important for executives, yes. So grab them for yourself as well. Average impressions. So this is how many times your posts are seen, even briefly. This was key to our pitch to get those dedicated resources and editorial control. We had collectively about 180,000 followers, and looking through the numbers, only about 7,000 were seeing our posts. That statistic alone led to some eye popping from our executives and really helped them see the need to spend more efforts on curating content and listening to our audience and seeing what they want. Percent impressions, this is the percentage of your followers who see your posts on average. This wasn't one we started tracking until recently, but it's basically the average impressions divided by your number of followers. So I was worried when we were going through the pilot that we'd get feedback from executives, well, of course your impressions went up, the number of followers you gained went up. If you turn it into a percentage, it removes that argument, and it gives you, a benchmark that you can track throughout the years, however you want to do this. Just a quick note on impressions, Instagram doesn't have them, so this is mostly for Facebook and Twitter. Average engagement per post is another one. This helps you learn which posts are doing your best and worst, so you can learn from them. And then the average engagement per follower shows how many interactions on average you're getting per follower. And that's kind of in the same vein as the percent impressions. This shows the engagement based on posts, removing the increased followers as a factor. Our report also includes spaces for takeaways and context. So your social media staff can look at the raw numbers and draw those conclusions that they can then present and articulate to executives in a way that makes sense to them. So this would be an opportunity to indicate whether any major events happened during that time, like a water boil, or Twitter removed a bunch of your followers because Russia. That's a good place to put that. Okay, so I'm gonna exit out here and show you what our reporting looks like. Hopefully you can see this. So this is the spreadsheet that we use to put in all of those stats that I just talked about. And we're going to start doing them quarterly. I'm going to start running that at the middle of January to pull from Q1 FY21. But we used it to compare our pilot to the months before the pilot. And as you can see, it pretty clearly shows the jump that we experienced, especially if you get down here, which is where I'm pulling most of our stuff for Twitter, it's removing the direct replies. That increases the numbers across the board exponentially as well. So that's Twitter. We did the same for Facebook and then Instagram. So that's kind of what it looks like from our pilot. The quarterly templates that I have departments trying out right now look kind of the same, except it's divided into quarters. I picked the colors at random, so this is not something you have to use, but I think it's useful to help show, the different quarters. And then we also created a how-to guide so that every department or staff who uses this template is pulling the exact same data. If you've ever pulled data from Facebook or Twitter, especially Facebook, there's like a million worksheets and a bunch of different stats. So this is just making sure we're all looking at the same information and entering it in the same way. So that's how that works. After this, if you're on here from the government social media Facebook page, I'm going to be posting this version on that page, so we can start using this template to do some government social media benchmarking, which is also going to be important for your reports and to know how you're doing. I think right now a lot of us are relying on industry standards, where we get compared to Beyonce, right? That's not apples to apples, or just comparing to ourselves. So yes, we're doing better than we were doing last quarter, but how does that compare to other cities who have a similar population or effort? So if you're interested in this, definitely let us know and follow the government social media video or Facebook page, because I'm going to be posting it there and you can add your stuff there. Great. So again, I'm testing this with departments right now before we roll it out citywide. The ultimate goal is to create some unified reporting around social media. I'm sure this sounds familiar to a lot of you, where social media is kind of a box check. We assume if there's a project or service or something happening, we're going to post to social. It's something our management asks us to do all the time, but there hasn't really ever been any, especially citywide, unified reporting so that we can show our output and the effect we're making, and then use that tool and that data to advocate for additional resources or support, so that we can really start meeting the goals laid out in the department and move the needle for our cities. So again, the more you can identify tie-ins between your metrics and your efforts on social media, the more clout you're going to have with your executives and your management. Just really quickly, this is something I put together. It's in here as a resource as well, but I looked through all of our department key performance indicators and pulled all the ones that I thought social media could have a metric for, and I proposed the metrics and some other recommendations. There our performance indicators do talk about social media, but there have never been any metrics tied to them. So, you know, if your department doesn't have KPIs, I definitely recommend working with management to at least establish them for social. And if they do, definitely ask management for them so you can identify how social media fits into that and continue to make your case about why social is important using your own information, right, for your department. So that kind of covers how we are tracking it for our team. Now to get into management. Yeah, metrics for management. It's a little bit different. So which metrics do your bosses want to see? Again, I want to emphasize that last point I've been making. If you don't already have KPI, your department KPIs, get them and then find where social media can fit in. Otherwise, I think these are good metrics and data points to pull for management. Number of followers, again, percent impressions, and average engagement per post. I think it helps having a definition on that report, however you give it to them, what impressions and engagement are, just to refresh their memory, because this is not a language most management speak. And changes from the previous report, I think would be important, you know, just some way visually to show like, yes, it's gone up with a little green arrow, something to make it pretty easy to understand. And visuals like this beautiful graph our friend from Nickelback is showing us would help. Samples of your work, if there's room for that in your report. You know, one of the things we looked at weekly in our pilot project to see what lessons we learned, you know, what did well, what didn't, was to pull the best and worst from each platform during that week from engagement and impressions. So just selecting some of those things to show them what you did over that time period would be helpful. And then any takeaways or context you can provide. So if there's a spike in engagement because you have to tell people to boil their water, for instance, never happened here. I don't know what you're talking about. No, definitely did. We need to, you know, clarify that, like that's why or, you know, you had the water boil in October, so your November numbers are down. Make sure to emphasize that in that report as well, so they understand like, yeah, it went down, but that's because, you know, our water's clean again. Sorry. So how you present this information to management depends on your department, your management, and your goals. So if it's just a status update, just to let them know you're still plugging along and you're doing good things, and that's what they've asked for, I think these metrics and highlights with maybe a graph or two is probably fine. Just make sure, again, you're tying them back to and framing them in terms of your department goals so that they are, again, reminded of what we're trying to do as a department and how social media is critical to those efforts. If you're trying to advocate for more resources, which is what we're constantly trying to do, I definitely say a presentation. So we've found scheduling an hour to present the results and the work we've done to be the most effective with our management using this deck. So there again, every slide reminded that these are advancing our goals toward our citywide strategic plan. And that seemed to work really well. It gives us a chance to explain what engagement means and impressions are and show the data and examples. We just recently showed them the report from the pilot, and we got to show them how the lessons we've learned, thanks to having a dedicated team and running these analytics, have led to changes in our strategy and content, and how those new posts have actually gotten more eyes on them like we said they would, so we can put kind of apples to apples before pilot and after pilot to show like how our content has changed and that it's working with those statistics. So whatever you do for management, keep it simple, keep it tied to department goals and strategic branding if you've got it, and keep it consistent. So you're setting benchmarks and expectations for yourself, your team, and your management, and you and they can't track your progress if it's not consistent. So that's pretty much covers my thoughts on metrics and how we picked the ones that we did. If there's questions now, I can take them, or I mean, I think we've got time. I can go into a little bit about our pilot if you want to see this work in action. So what do you guys think?
Allie, this is Ray. I think there's some great questions that have been coming through, and I think people would be interested in your pilot. So I'd have you go right in, describe the pilot, and then maybe after my quick session, we can come back and hit these questions in addition to the ones that we had written in ahead of time.
Cool. All right. Let's get to it. Okay.
Oh, and I do appreciate the characterization of keep it simple for management as a representative of management. Certainly need it that way.
Yes. For sure. And I mean, when you start throwing algorithms and engagement impressions, their eyes gloss over, and yeah, it can be kind of tough. So, okay, so so to understand kind of how far we've come and why, I want to give you a little bit of insight into the insane social media landscape we have down here in Austin. This is actual footage I took last week of me trying to corral some of our social efforts. The too long didn't read version, the social media in Austin is siloed. We have more than 250 social media accounts, and all of them are run by different teams. So there are few at best dedicated resources, and those who do post to social as part of their job do approximately 1.1 million other things. So in addition, there's little at best department tracking, and certainly not citywide, which kind of touches on why we've been developing metrics and using those. So this is definitely the case for the city's main social media accounts on the big three platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And that's where we start our story. So we have quite a few followers on our main accounts, close to about 200,000 when you add them all together. So despite, departments having their own accounts, they often request the main city accounts to share their information as well to reach more people. Well, we thought, were we? Were we reaching more people? After some discussions with the small team, we decided to run some numbers on our accounts to see what we see. Maybe the current structure wasn't so bad. It's very cute of us to think. These figures you're seeing right now are from our main three accounts for the first 4 months of this year. And as you can see, a tiny fraction of our followers were actually seeing our posts. So we were posting for other departments, but we weren't really making that much of a difference. So then we started trying to figure out why. We identified several reasons, and we'll get into one of those particularly, but one was that there really wasn't anyone managing the accounts consistently. It was scattershot with a lot of people contributing and no coordination. Yeah, that's right. We're just going to pause for a second to think about that. We had no coordination over our own main three accounts for the city. So after we collected ourselves, we thought, all right, well, what else? What else could be important for answering that question of, why are we not doing so well and reaching people? The algorithms presented itself as that answer. So algorithms are the calculations the platforms use to push information into people's news feeds. So the example I use is it's why you see the anti-vax post from Aunt Sue from 2 days ago before you see the photo of your friend's lunch from 2 hours ago, because one of them created more interactions than the other. Positive or negative, I'll let you decide, but interactions are interactions. So Twitter's algorithm, for example, we did a lot of research on each of them. That one values recency and interactions, particularly interactions over time. So the more interactions on one post, the more it appears in news feeds, and the more your other posts are picked up as well. The more people see your posts, the more they might share them, the more you bring on tasty followers, right? So it's a cycle. And that cycle goes both ways. So ours was in a reverse spin. We posted boring stuff, which didn't get any interactions, which meant the algorithm didn't pick up our other stuff either. And we kept doing it because we weren't tracking and we didn't know better. So if this sounds familiar, I'm sorry, and I am here to be a shoulder to cry on if you need it. If it doesn't, pay heed and take steps to avoid getting there. A couple of things that definitely have helped us is setting up an approval process for new accounts to be created so they can't just create them on their own, and making sure you're doing regular checks on your metrics so you can learn from them. So, okay, baby, there we go. Okay, so once we had an idea of the problem, as management likes, we came up with a plan, a solution, and pitched it to executives. So you can see the basics of our pitch on the screen. I'm telling you this in case this sounds familiar and the strategy can help you, but also so you can see how we made data matter to executives. We framed it as falling short of our mission of our department and offered a solution to the problem we were presenting. In our pitch, we showed executives examples of the issue, examples from other cities, how this is tied to our department and city goals, and we explained the numbers. And again, that biggest impact we had was when we talked about impressions. We told them that despite having 180,000 followers, roughly 7,000 were seeing our posts on average, and that struck a chord because they could understand those numbers and how it was happening. So not only did the executives agree to this pilot, they extended it, and it ended up giving us staff. So one of the best things we did during the pilot were these weekly analytics. seems like a lot probably to think about doing analytics weekly, but once you get used to it, I mean, I was the one doing them and it took 30 minutes and it vastly improved the conversations we were having at our weekly meetings to look back, see what worked, add the lessons to our style guide so we all, could learn from those experiences moving forward, and then figure out how to plan the next week's and future week's content. So each week from each of the 3 platforms, we pulled some of the same metrics I've been talking about: number of posts, number of followers, number of new followers, average impressions, average engagement per post, average engagement per follower. And then we also pulled the best and worst posts for impressions and engagements. And then, yeah, we talked about it. What went well, what didn't, what lessons did we learn, etc. So that helped us kind of establish some good benchmarking for ourselves. So we could, again, it's not ideal to compare yourself to yourself, but until we build up these benchmarks for government, social, it's really all we've got. So again, yes, we turned these into a style guide. So anyone else who joins the social media team, they have a resource that they can turn to help develop the content that we know our audience wants to see. We also turn those lessons into 2-pagers on each platform for departments to share out as well. It goes through specs and demographics and different metrics that they should be looking for on those platforms. And then the whole second page is do's and don'ts based on the lessons we've learned through this pilot and using the metrics to kind of guide our way. And all the metrics we took during the weekly, they informed the metrics that we use on a quarterly basis now too. So just to show you, yes, we did learn lessons and we incorporated them into our strategy. So these are just some of the main takeaways that we learned about what our followers like. Emojis are good, so are GIFs and videos, but for real, graphics and things that look like ads. So basically all we were posting before the pilot really didn't do that well. That's not the kind of content our audience in Austin wants to see. So they didn't, because algorithms didn't pick it up. Also, city values and behind the scenes do really well. That picture from before is from Father's Day. That's our city manager and his partner. They had just adopted a new baby. And because the pilot existed and we knew that Father's Day was coming up, we asked to see if we could share a photo with our followers, and it did really well. So local content is critical, especially, I think most people have a lot of pride in their cities, and when you post something that they can easily identify as from their city and unique to their city, the more they're going to react to it. So that's kind of an example, our World Emoji Day contribution. But yeah, the more you can invest in photos and videos, experiences, stories that clearly and uniquely tell your city story, the better. On Instagram, we have a policy now that you lead with a strong image or video, and if you don't have that, you don't post it. That might seem kind of basic, but when a lot of people have access to your Instagram account.
Oh, Allie, you just cut out here. Oh. Looks like we lost Allie. If somebody wants to shoot us a quick comment to say that we're still hearing Ray, and we will shoot a short text to Allie and see if we can get her back on.
If you have the time to do that for every one of your posts and see how that works, go for it. But
Allie, this is Ray. We just lost you for about 10 seconds.
Oh, okay.
So we're hoping to just hit the rewind button in case it's the whole group and not just us.
Yeah. What was the last thing you heard me say?
The last thing was we were panically looking for the internet button, but after you talked about your contribution to World Emoji Day.
Got it. Okay. So local content is critical. So we've just missed Instagram. All right, cool. So really quickly on Instagram, we changed gears. Instead of letting just anyone post anything to Instagram, we shut that down and implemented a policy that if you don't have a good image or video, you don't post to Instagram. That might seem basic. I'm sure that seems basic, but making sure that's in your style guide and in your priorities and standards is critical. So you have that, you can push back against people who are asking to post to things that maybe won't fit. And some other lessons we've learned from Instagram. I saw this as a question that came in before. We've done a ton of research, looking at our metrics and all of the blogs out there. So we recommend going for 1 to 50 characters on Instagram. Some blogs will tell you 0 if the picture speaks for itself. Great. We try to use 1 to 3 hashtags. I know other people use like 200, and if that's your game and that's working for you, great. I'd just say try to curate that list probably a little bit to see which hashtags are picking up momentum the most and focus on those. There also is guideline to include at least 1 emoji, so we knocked that out of the park. I guess this is from Twitter, so it's okay. But to include at least one emoji. And then try to post more on the weekends, which is better for engagement. Otherwise, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on weekdays, particularly 11 a.m. Wednesday and 10 to 11 a.m. Fridays. That's, again, from research from our own audience and from externally. So I'd just say, really try to, if that's important to you, is to figure out when to post. There's a start, and see which works best for your audience. And then just randomly, the most popular hashtag is #love. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing we learned is emergencies still matter. Most of our engagement comes from emergencies, and that's good, right? We want people to know to boil their water. But the difference is because we put so much work on the back end of making our content better and more responsive to our audience, even more people are seeing our emergencies, which is the point. And the other thing, I've been talking a lot about metrics. They are very important, but don't just rely on them. One of the things we did was we posted a black and white photo to Instagram and it didn't do well. And our immediate response was, oh, well, black and white doesn't do well. We ended up posting another black and white photo from the History Center and it did great. So, just make sure you're kind of checking the style and content guides and the lessons you've learned to make sure that those still hold true and it wasn't just kind of a one-off fluke like game day or something. So just a really quick example so you can see, maybe if it'll work. Nope. There we go. So you can see how the lessons we learned through these metrics have changed how we're posting to our accounts. So the the post on the left is from before our pilot, where we had a request from the Austin Police Department to post something about this app that they had. So we did it, check, great. The one on the right is a similar request we got from a department, letting people know about safety information so that they can know before they go, that kind of stuff. We added a photo and some emojis and some hashtags, and the impressions and engagement were significantly higher. So it has led to changes in our practice and as a result, changes in the impressions and engagements that we get. All right, so okay, Allie, did this work? Like all these examples, blah, blah, blah. Yes, if you remember the slide from a few slides ago, or the numbers from a few slides ago, we have eclipsed nearly every metric from the before time. So the average monthly followers are up by more than 300 over all of 2018. For Twitter, our impression per follower doubled. Our goal for engagement per follower, which was 0.1%, which is above average, reached that. Facebook did even better. Again, impressions per follower more than doubled, and engagement per follower reached the high benchmark, which is above 1%. We actually didn't do as well on Instagram, but primarily because we had a really awesome post in February. Still, our Instagram is way better than 2018, and if you remove that one post from February, we definitely knocked it out of the park. But that helped us be kind of frank with our management. We are still struggling with Instagram. We need that pipeline of good content. And that kind of helped us show the need for the staff that we ended up advocating for. So we successfully used these metrics throughout the pilot to show how we were moving the needle, even with this ragtag less than part-time team that we had. We were honest about our struggles to keep up, not just with Instagram, but creating that proactive content was one of the things that we were missing and always scrambling to do while we tried to maintain our day jobs, and the burnout we felt trying to do all of that together. So through the metrics and the examples we made and the progress that we made through the pilot, we were approved for a part-time social media strategist. We're hiring now if you know someone in the area who might be interested in it, but that was kind of the biggest victory, I think, for us. Yes, the impressions and engagement going up is huge. Yes, having that editorial content and having a little bit more control over what goes out on our platforms has been really important. But being able to make the case using metrics, using our department goals, using, real life examples leading to actual dedicated staff for social is, really the only reason I think I'm even presenting this today, because it works. So there you go. That's it.
Great. Well, thank you, Allie. That was wonderful. And we have quite a few questions we're going to circle back through in just a few minutes, both the ones that you had that people sent in earlier, as well as the ones that have been asked on screen. I would say that I'm super impressed. I was impressed when we were together down in Austin a couple of weeks ago. What people should also know is Allie is an expert gift giver. She and I were shopping for one of our 5-year employees that she's worked with for a long time. So we can add that to your sort of list of accomplishments. So we have folks on the phone here from government agencies, law enforcement, schools, other public agencies. And at the highest level, I hope if you got here, you think that engaging over social media with your citizens and constituents is important. I would say there are people that want to wait till 10 o'clock a.m. on a Tuesday, wait on hold on the phone for 10 to 15 minutes to get their question answered or to make a comment. The issue is they're not making any more of those people. And so if you want to reach the citizen population that's growing, you want to engage where your citizens live. They're living in social media. So I hope by virtue of attending the conference, that's the audience that we have. And the next question that was really handled, I think, expertly by Allie, so thank you so much, is how do I do that? So I have the will. How do I get the skill? How do I engage? How do I measure? Allie, super impressed that you got the resources, you got the ability to control your editorial content, and you got the time in these weekly meetings to bring the team together and organize. So super impressive to see what you've put together, and I think really hopefully useful to folks that are on the phone and on the webinar. We want to cover really quickly. So that's the everything good that can happen with using social media. We want to cover a little bit is where could this go wrong? How do you make sure that you're protected and you're covered? Because social media networks were fundamentally built for the billions. Facebook builds for their 3 or 4 billion folks. And collectively, in the public space, there's about 80,000 of us, 80,000 schools, municipal organizations, law enforcement, and cities. And so these networks are built for the billions. They're not built for the tens of thousands. And there's some gaps in the network. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can get the goodness without sort of entering with the risk. So maybe hit the next slide for me. Perfect. So the place to start in this really is it's a 3-step process to prepare as you get into this, make sure that you have the coverage, the safety net that you need. And the first is to start at the statewide law level. So in every state in the union and the protectorates, we have public information laws. And so here is, you can go to bit.ly/SM Public Records. This is a site that covers the published records laws in every one of the 50 states in the union. And you can click on here and look at your individual state. Now, most of those laws, they really cover the content in the communication, not the coverage. Many of these laws go back to the 70s with the sort of the birth of the freedom of information movement. And they cover, again, really what's in that communication, what is in that phone call, what is in that text, what is in that social media post, what is in that email. And so get comfortable with what's going on in your state, via this link. And then that number 2, the next is, well, what about the guidance or the guidance or the policy? So like in California, there's a California Records of Information Management. You can see links to this. And so, how do you then interpret that specifically with respect to social media? And so there's guidelines here to help you do that. And we stand by to do that. And then really the third thing is, how do you take that and embody it into a local policy and practice? What do you do about deletions? What do you do about comments? What's on, what's off? How do you have this style guide that Allie talked about? How do you actually enforce that and have adherence and look through to make sure that your policy that your practice confirms your policy, that your policy is in line with your statewide guidance, and your statewide guidance rolls up into the law. So that's really the funnel. And so we invite people to use this as a resource on the web. Click on, download this stuff, give us a call. We're happy to sort of walk that through you, because there are nuances, and it is different in every one of the states. And it's different in sometimes based on whether you're in education, you're a superintendent, or if you're a clerk or a social media manager for a city like Allie is. So there are certainly nuances to keep in mind here. So maybe hit the next slide for us. So the next question, really, you could just do the whole build, is what happens when this gets tested? So it's one thing to have a great policy. It's one thing to be prepared, but is there really an issue? One of the questions that got written in is, ahead of times is, what's the real risk of a FOIA request leading to a lawsuit? I can tell you we have over 2,000 customers we work with here, and we help them. We have a team that stands by to help with FOIA requests to the extent that you don't want to just do it in our product. And that team helps with hundreds of FOIA requests per year. I am hopeful that there's not lawsuits behind all of them. We don't have visibility to that. But there are tests in each of the states, and we're happy to cover, whoever asked that question, examples from your specific state of what happens when things go wrong if you can't produce. So this is an example that happened last year from Maryland. And as good a policy as you have, Allie, I don't know if everybody that works for the city of Austin does exactly what you tell them to do when you tell them to do it. But that hasn't been my experience in running organizations, is that, people try to do their best, but sometimes they go awry. So, the governor in Maryland deleted some posts. And, the big thing at issue here is not whether he appropriately deleted the posts or not, in my mind. The issue isn't whether the posts were objectionable or not. The issue is, post the ACLU lawsuit, we couldn't even have collectively that discussion because the posts were gone. And once they were deleted, the sort of the public discourse, the record, the discussion around, was he right in deleting those or not? Were they obscene or not? We can't even have that. And there's a settlement of the lawsuit. So nobody gets their day in court or their day in sort of the public in the town square, because the information is gone. This is a $65,000 settlement. I can tell you that settlements are anywhere from $7,000 to $70,000 on these. In some states, there are watchdog groups that are now filing these lawsuits. They're testing, can people produce this information or not? And if you can't, they see dollar signs. And so it is something that we see picking up some. I wouldn't say yet it's prevalent, thank goodness. And hopefully, because most people have appropriate policies and are covering and can produce these records requests, and frankly, in important situations, can produce the records so we can have the discussion around what actually happened and was it appropriate or not. So here's one that was a reasonably costly settlement in the state of Maryland. Next. Just wanted to spend some time. We have some folks on this webinar that are relatively new around the idea of deleted content. And this really is one of the big sort of issues here fundamentally. On average, our customers have about 127 deleted Facebook posts per month. And so, this happens quite often. And it's not just, you could create a policy. I think, Allie, you and I talked about the policy in Austin is not to delete content, maybe to hide some content, but not delete content so it comes back. But it's not just under your control whether or not content gets deleted. In this example, you'll see Sabrina Mickelson up in the top left, who is a citizen in Oregon, and she's writing in about a hunting license, for her children. And rightly, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife responds to that and engages in a conversation. And if Sabrina decides to quit social networks or Facebook, or to delete this post, all of the communication is gone, including what the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife responded. In this case, it's great. They answered a question. It is, in fact, a federal policy to collect Social Security when looking for hunting and fishing licenses. But if Sabrina sued and said, there was a breach in my Social Security number, I gave it out on sort of, Facebook, and it was requested by this particular social media manager at the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, we can certainly reproduce this, even though it had been deleted by Sabrina, and say, no, that's not the case. right? Or God forbid it was, that's a training opportunity for this social media manager not to ask for social security numbers over unsecure channels. And so unlike the content, right, is what's protected. That content, if it was an email, if you get that email, you're under control over that. That email sits on a server and you own it. Social networks are inherently collaborative and two-way, so it's under the control of the poster. So even though it's in your custody and you talked about it, it's fundamentally owned by the person that posts it, so they have control over it. Unlike an email, unlike a phone call, unlike sort of a text, that tether still exists. And that's why you got to be careful and make sure that you have the ability to reproduce the whole record and you can reproduce it in context, in particular, this deleted content that's outside of your organization's control. So lest I give a quick sort of snippet that's all bad things can happen, good things can happen too. I did have to put one in with a dog. I didn't want Allie to be the only person with slides with dog pictures in it after we learned that dog pictures do really, really well in videos. But this is the city of Northport in Florida. They had an engagement that did really well because they had their K9 unit in it and their dog post in it. But frankly, it was involved in arrest. It got somewhat contentious. There was some information, 700 comments on this post that they deemed sort of objectionable, and they deleted the post. Well, that the deletion of that post, that particular arrest involving the K9 unit, went to court. In giving that court, they needed to go back and get that deleted content. And so they had the ability to quickly, go into a system, deliver that deleted content, and that is not a stressful day. Right. And they can argue whether the dog did the right thing, the wrong thing, the police officer, the perpetrator, right, and can have its day in court. We can work out because the actual sort of comments are available in there. So next slide. So that is the short bit here. I just do want to pause. We're going to put up a quick poll for folks, and then we're going to get back to a lot of these great questions from, it looks like, pretty experienced people that have questions for Allie. But we're going to put up this poll, and this poll is going to say, look, one, if you have questions around what's going on in your state with respect to social media, we can help you with that. Number two, if you want to know what your neighbors are doing. So like we invited Allie onto this webinar, if you want to get hooked up with some of your neighbors or some of your co-travelers, if you're a large city, a small city, a sheriff department, give us a call. We're happy to make those introductions. We really want to be a matchmaker here of best practices across the industry. If you want to what's really happening with records requests and legal items, if you're not in Maryland or Florida, right? We're not going to subject you guys to 100 different case studies here on the webinar. I think your eyes would glaze over. Nobody has tolerance for that much compliance talk. So please do take a minute, fill out this poll, and then we're going to circle back around to some of these questions. Did I do that right?
Absolutely. Right. Thank you, Ray, and thank you, Allie. Such great information about social media, how to grow it, and how to stay safe while you're on it. And while we're waiting for you guys to respond to that poll, we're going to leave it up for a few moments. Let's go ahead and jump into some of these amazing questions that you've sent in. And we have questions from both the webinar and from earlier registration. So we're going to get started with one for both Allie and Ray. If there's only capacity to check 3 data points, which would Allie and Ray suggest as the most valuable?
Allie, why don't you start with that 3 data points?
Especially if it's for management, I would do number of followers, percent impressions, and average engagement per follower.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I may add to that, so I'm going to cheat and put a 4th one, is increasingly I think people are going to be asking about responsiveness. So it's one thing Allie and I talked a little bit about. It's one of those things that you need resources for, but how responsive you are to your citizens. So not just the reach, which is you out, but when people come back into you, how quickly you're able to handle, to the extent that it's it's a request for not you out, but we're now seeing more citizens come in. So that's maybe anything I'd add. But if you were picking 3, the question is, are you reaching your constituents? Remember, I loved what Allie said. It's not just about the number of followers you have, although it starts there. If you have no followers, the engagement's not that important. So I think that's why management focuses on it. But the second thing is, are you really reaching those folks? Are you making it through all of the pet photos? And there's probably a whole nother talk that we could do on how to work through the algorithms to make sure that you in fact are reaching those followers. Because although people are on Facebook 20 hours a day, they don't consume all the information that they follow, and you got to get yourself to the top of the list.
Excellent. Our next question: do you dedicate a portion of the marketing and communications budget to social media ads or boosted posts, Allie?
My department doesn't really have funds for that, but I know a lot of other departments do, and we recommend it. We typically run a lot of ads on our accounts for other departments because of our increased follower base, and now, even more so thanks to our increased performance in the algorithm. So yeah, I would definitely recommend putting money behind it, especially if you're really trying to gain followers or there's a message that you really want people to see. The platforms, we're in a capitalistic society, right? So the platforms want your money, and the more money you give them, the better you're going to perform in their platform. So I definitely would recommend setting aside some money.
Makes perfect sense. Our next question is another one for both of you. What advice and tips do you have for someone that is starting from the beginning in building a social media strategy?
It's an elephant, right? So one bite at a time. I think the best thing you can do is make sure you have a team. I will say you run into a lot of decision fatigue if you're alone, even if you're not alone in social media, and just having one other person to bounce ideas off of or work through responding to, is this a troll or is there a legitimate question here? How do we deal with this negativity? Or, there's this breaking news. How can we handle it? Just having a team, even if they're not dedicated, even if it's just someone else in your department or your city that you trust, just having that as a resource. And then looking at what other cities did well, are doing well. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel if others have already built it. So, making sure you do that research on other cities, reach out to them. I mean, every person I've ever interacted with who works in social media for government is delightful and funny and helpful. So definitely I'd recommend getting plugged into some of those organizations and learning from what other people have experienced and their lessons, so you don't have to make the same mistakes we have. And then again, really, I'd try to identify those department key performance indicators. I know I keep saying that, but that's really going to be where you can identify what your goals and priorities are and shape your social media strategy around the overall mission of your department, which is going to pay off in the long run because that's what your management wants to see, and they're the ones who sign the checks.
Allie, I just add to that, we have some folks on the phone are from much smaller sort of organizations and cities and municipalities, and the idea of building a team, they're probably saying, I'm the chief cook, and bottle watcher sort of here. But the first thing I would do if you're really starting out from scratch is to do that research before you get started. Likely somebody's already doing it in your community. If you don't have a city Facebook page, somebody has a city Facebook page. If you do not have a school page, somebody has a school page. So do some research to find out what is already happening. And so, because you might have to reclaim your presence a little bit if you are the official source, and do some research. And then, like anything, really making sure that you have a policy and a process, so that as you bring on team members, as you expose people what you're doing there, they understand sort of why you're doing it and what kind of the rules of engagement are, because it can be a little bit the Wild West. And so even just a simple policy or practice document that says, this is what our goals are. We're going to start with this network. We're going to publish this often. This is going to be our tone of voice. And this is going to be our basic rules of engagement. Because somebody will come in and say, why are you doing this? Why don't we just forgo that whole Facebook thing? And the answer is, well, because we want to talk to our citizens, right? But expect to be asked the question so that you have some information to understand why you're doing it, and what the basic process of engaging on social media is.
Excellent advice from both of you. We'll be closing the poll in about 30 seconds. So if you've been on the fence, go ahead and make those decisions or wait to help. While we wait, next question is going to be, do you differentiate between PSA type posts versus posts for activities to take action on events, polls, etc.? Allie.
Yes, I was hoping you'd ask this question because I get to tell my metaphor that has helped everyone understand about the variety of posts that we need to add to our social media. So yes, and improv lesson, yes, and ha. We found before the pilot we were mostly posting those kind of both, right? The PSAs and take our survey, take our poll. So we were really functioning as more of an RSS feed than using social for how it's intended, right? That two-way engaging conversation. So we decided to put our different posts in buckets and we use this to explain to executives about why we needed dedicated staff to build out content that, goes outside of those must-have posts. So we told them to look at your followers like children, right? You want your kids, I'd assume, having dog kids myself, you want them to have a balanced diet. So if you look at your PSAs, your safety messaging as the protein, right? So tofu or steak or whatever you like, they need that protein. That's something they're going to eat probably regardless of whatever else you're feeding them. So that's very important. Second thing, your veggies, right? Your administrative, we're in budgeting.
Oh, we lost the PSA portion of the PSA. We'll wait for Allie for a minute.
Oh no.
Oh, so let me know if she comes back on. There is a.
Lose me again?
Hey, there we go.
Sorry. All right, where do we leave?
Middle of the PSA explanation.
The PSA explanation?
I think specifically whether tofu or steak was your thing.
Oh, got it. Nice direct quote. Okay, yeah. So we quantified our emergency post and safety post as that protein. It's something that your kids are probably going to eat without too. Your followers are going to see that and they're going to engage or at least have read what you're posting about emergencies. So that's something you can kind of take for granted. That's definitely what they want to see on social. That's what your kids want to eat. So the veggies we said were the more administrative posts, we're in the middle of budget engagement, take this survey, hey, we're trying to develop a master plan, help us figure out our priorities. That's mostly what we were posting in addition to the emergency stuff. And it's not necessarily what our followers wanted. They didn't do too well in the algorithm, probably also because we're asking people to click off of a platform that wants money and eyes on it. But that was largely why we weren't performing well in the algorithm, because that's what we were primarily posting. So we were giving our children a diet of a lot of veggies without any seasoning, right? Just plain, here's maybe a graphic and a link, and meat. Well, you need to do something more on social to bring your followers to the table. So we identified those kind of fun posts that don't necessarily have any real meaning outside of just maybe making someone chuckle. We identified those as candy, like a little candy to get the kid to the table to eat this well-balanced meal that we're trying to give them. So that's one of the ways we tried to explain how we could do better in the algorithm and increase our engagements and impressions, and then ultimately overall followers, is by having some dedicated resource and thought and strategy behind developing this kind of more lighthearted, fun content. The executives bought it, and through the pilot, we've identified yes, the emergency, the meat, right? That's still primarily what people are gleaning from our social media diet on our account. The candies have definitely helped. So we've seen a boost as a result of those two, we've seen a boost in the veggie posts that we've been making. So we're getting more engagement and interaction on those surveys.
Allie, in my house, we always put cheese on the broccoli.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Yes. So 100%. Craft singles.
Yes. So
that's what we've tried to do with those posts, is add in those emojis and hashtags. So yes.
Excellent. We have a ton of questions really about a lot of the great resources that you put together. So it's people that want to borrow from your hard work. and they're asking what can we send out in others. And I had a couple of comments. Is one, I think if you are not following government social media Facebook page, I think that's probably a convenient place, Ali, for you to post some of these things that you want to share with folks.
Yep.
And then secondly, we are happy to sort of consolidate which of this people want to, Ali, you're comfortable sharing with folks, and you can send an email. Do folks have my email on this one?
So everyone should have an email from an Erica Brooks, who's our Director of Marketing, and you can respond to that email to receive all the resources. And there's also going to be a follow-up email, and we'll be posting resources in that email as well.
So that way we will, you can either follow Ali, or send us an email. So we're not barraging her. She's doing us all collectively educating us on this webinar. So if you would either grab it from GSMCon's Facebook page or email Erica. I'm ray.carey at Archive Social if you want to email me. So Ali, we'll try to keep your inbox relatively clean, because we sure do appreciate you taking the time. I am sorry we didn't get to all of these questions. There are a lot of great questions that we would like to get to, and so feel free to email us, email me if you have more questions. What else did we have?
We are actually at the top of the hour. Our hour has flown by, and I know we've all learned so much. And so I really want to say thank you to Ray Carey and to Ali Van Dyke for their time. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I know I have. And stay tuned for further adventures. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and follow Ali, the city of Austin, Texas, to learn more about everything that's going on in local government, federal government, schools, and law enforcement. Until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.